At 63 and newly widowed, I was trying to figure out what life looked like without Walter. My son, Daniel, kept stopping by with gentle pep talks about a fresh start, squeezing my fingers like I might break. He said I should think about putting my life insurance payout into something real, something I could manage day to day, something that wouldn't gather dust in an account I was too scared to touch. It sounded practical, like a way to keep my hands busy and my mind from drifting into the empty parts of the house. Chloe chimed in with that earnest smile of hers, telling me they only wanted me to feel safe and settled. Pick something you can step into right away, she said, something that gives you a little purpose. I nodded along because it was easier than saying how lost I felt whenever the afternoons went silent, when the kettle clicked off and there was no one to ask if I wanted tea. Then a listing flashed across my screen. A grand old place on Elm Street. I didn't even try to talk myself out of it. I loved it the second I saw the wraparound porch and the tall windows. I could picture the grandkids tumbling down the stairs and voices echoing in rooms that had waited a long time for laughter. There was more than enough space for the family I barely got to see these days. I started daydreaming about holiday dinners and summer cookouts. Everyone squeezed around a table while the screen door snapped in the breeze and laughter spilled across the yard. The more I imagined it, the more I kept my mouth shut. Daniel and Chloe always seemed to stiffen when I talked about spending on myself. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was a gut feeling. Either way, I kept quiet and held the plan close. I bought the house through a trust and brought in a management company to handle the details. 6 weeks of non-stop work. Paint, floors, lighting, landscaping, the whole checklist. They sent me progress photos every few days, and I'd sit at the kitchen table circling little fixes with a pen. I wanted to walk them through a place that felt ready to live in, not a project. I wanted it to be perfect before I told them anything. I kept seeing Daniel's face in my mind, the way it would soften when I put keys in his hand and told him I wanted us close again. When the last contractor drove away and the house smelled faintly of new wood and soap, I took a breath and called him. "Can you and Chloe meet me for lunch? I've got something wonderful to show you." "Actually, Mom," he said, "we were hoping to show you something." He mentioned family expansion, which made my heart hop. "Are you having another baby?" I asked, almost laughing for the first time in months. "Not exactly," he said gently. "We're thinking about moving. We need more room." He sounded hopeful in a way I hadn't heard since the funeral. "That's wonderful," I told him, genuinely glad. It felt like my careful planning might finally mean something. "Where are you looking?" I asked. "There's this gorgeous Victorian on Elm Street," Chloe said, and I had to grip the phone to steady myself. I could already see their faces falling when they learned it was out of reach for them, the way numbers on a page can sink a dream in seconds. But then a thought clicked into place. I didn't have to hand them a finished surprise. Maybe I could help in a different way. "Daniel," I said, "what if I helped with the down payment?" As soon as I said it, I realized this might work out even better than I'd imagined. They walked through the front door like people who already had the run of the place, and I realized I'd made a mistake by not telling them sooner. I kept a pleasant face and let them show me around my own house as if I were a guest. Chloe floated from room to room, fingers gliding over the counters and the glossy banister, narrating possibilities with that bright tone that's hard to push back against. "Mom, look at this kitchen," she cooed, opening drawers and admiring the sunlight across the island. She traced where a long farmhouse table could go, where a high chair might tuck in, where a coffee station would live. In the front room, she pictured a reading nook by the bay window, and on the porch she talked about string lights and late summer dinners. Daniel tested the water pressure and talked about school districts and commute time as if the place were already theirs. I walked behind them, letting the tour happen, feeling like a stranger in the home I had bought. Standing in a space I had purchased and furnished, I pictured how quickly I'd get folded into a corner. In the hallway, Chloe assigned the main suite to them, obviously, and pointed at the sunny room at the back for a future nursery. She told me my space could be the small bedroom near the guest bath. "Cozy, but it works," she said, patting my arm like she'd solved something generous. I kept smiling, but inside I was counting up all the ways they'd already slotted me into an arrangement where I wasn't a partner. I would be the older relative tucked in the smallest room while they spread out and made plans. Then Daniel explained that the sellers wanted a cash buyer. No financing, something about a trust, and a clean, quick close, clear title. No banks, no delays. He sighed and said it was a shame because the house was so close to perfect and just out of reach. They stood there with matching hopeful faces, and for a second I almost told them everything. I had a choice. Hand them the truth and watch their expressions light up, or keep quiet and see what they tried next. I picked silence, because once words are out, you can't reel them back in. I suggested we keep looking for something inside their actual budget, a place that could still be lovely without breaking sense. Chloe's smile went stiff. "Laura, this house is exactly what suits our needs," she said, and the phrase "our needs" rang in my ears while she edged me toward that little room like a boarder. I thought about the deed with my name on it and about Walter's life insurance, the money they'd encouraged me to put to work. I told myself I wasn't going to justify spending that money on someone else's dream if my gut didn't feel right. A gift should come from joy, not pressure. Daniel nodded, but his eyes kept sliding back to the foyer like the house might run away if we didn't grab it. "I hear you," I told him, "but I'm not making any snap decisions with my money." He shifted smoothly into hurry. "We have to act quickly. If you're serious about helping, someone needs to make the cash offer today," he said, glancing at Chloe for backup. Then he softened and added that it would be good for me to live close so they could take care of me as I got older. I pictured being cared for in that small bedroom while choices got made over my head, and the image stung. If I was going to write a check for hundreds of thousands of dollars, I wanted to speak directly with the person across the table. "Daniel," I said, keeping my tone even, "if I'm fronting $350,000, I'm talking to the agent myself." He hesitated and mentioned he and Chloe had already built good rapport with the agent, and maybe I should let them keep handling it. That was all I needed to hear. I stepped outside and called the management company. Calmly, I asked them to relist the house temporarily at the same price and terms, effective immediately. If anyone called with questions, they were to say the previous offer had fallen through, same price, same terms, nothing changed. The agent joined on speaker and sounded baffled. "Mrs. Bennett, you already own this property," she said. "Why would you want it relisted?" "Because I need to see exactly how my family behaves when they think it's still on the market," I answered. She paused, then said she would handle it and confirm in writing. I thanked her, hung up, and went back inside to find Daniel telling me again that we needed to move fast. The word fast had started to feel like a lever he could pull whenever my caution showed. 2 hours later, he called with fresh urgency in his voice. He said there was another buyer circling and that we had to act now, right now, before we lost the chance. He repeated phrases like time sensitive and we'll lose it until they blurred together. A cold weight settled under my ribs as I listened. My son was lying to me, building fake pressure to hurry my hand. After him, Chloe followed up with a tidy plan over the phone. I should wire the money first, and we'd sort out the paperwork afterward because timelines are tight and we can handle details later. Of course she did. I stared at my quiet living room, the phone heavy in my hand, and felt the line in the sand draw itself. The next morning, Daniel texted early with a neat line meant to close the book. Bad news. The house had already gone to another buyer. He added a sad face and a note about timing just not working out. I stared at the little bubbles, then at the stack of boxes by my door. I'd been packing quietly for a week, labeling kitchen, linens, office, planning to slip into my own place without a speech. I typed back something polite and bland, then put my phone face down and loaded the car. On the way over, I turned onto Elm Street and slowed. Chloe was on the sidewalk with a woman about my age, both of them dressed like they were headed to a closing. Chloe waved at a neighbor like she belonged there, then led the woman up the steps. I watched her take a small key from her purse and slide it into my lock. The door opened. My stomach went cold. They walked through like a scheduled showing, and after a minute I followed, keeping distance and letting the breeze cover my steps. Inside, Chloe's voice floated from room to room. She pointed out the built-ins, the light, the archways I'd paid to restore. The older woman measured the living room wall, then the hallway, calling out numbers while Chloe tapped notes into her phone. They moved like people fitting their lives into square footage that was already spoken for. I stood very still by the stairs and understood. The other buyer was a story meant for me. When they left, I called a locksmith. "Urgent?" he asked. "Today," I said. I waited on the porch, feeling like a sentinel posted at my own gate. He arrived within an hour and swapped every deadbolt and knob while I stood by and kept receipts. After he left, I called the management company and asked for cameras, front door, back door, along the porch, over the driveway and the entry hall. Motion alerts to my phone, I added. The technician finished by late afternoon. By evening, my phone chimed with a test clip. The porch light flicked on and off and a timestamp stamped the corner. At dawn the next day, my phone buzzed again. A clip loaded. Chloe at the front door, same purse, same determined set to her shoulders. She tried her key. It didn't turn. She pushed, then tried again. The handle rattled and stopped. She stepped back, scanned the frame like the wood had betrayed her, then pulled out her phone and made a call. A minute later, she left, tight-lipped and brisk. Half an hour after that, Daniel called me, voice pitched in that careful tone people use when they're rolling a story downhill. He said he was worried about vandalism on Elm Street and that he and Chloe had swung by to check on things because the listing seemed odd. "Something's off with the locks now," he added. "Maybe the sellers changed them? We thought we should make sure everything's okay." I let him talk until the hallway in my clip matched the rhythm of his explanation in my ear. "Daniel," I said, gentle but steady, "there aren't any sellers. I'm the owner. I had the locks changed. And the cameras. They recorded Chloe trying a key at my front door this morning." Silence. Then an exhale that sounded like a balloon giving up its last bit of air. "You... what?" he said, the word thin and lost. I could almost see the mental math in his eyes as he tried to make the pieces land somewhere that wasn't a confession. "I bought it weeks ago," I said, "through a trust. I've been getting it ready. I asked for it to be relisted to see how you'd handle it, and I saw enough." He didn't argue. He didn't defend Chloe. He went quiet in a way I'd never heard from him, like a radio dropped into water. "I need to come over," he said finally. "Tonight. Please." I told him I'd be home. I ended the call, set the phone down on the counter, and let the stillness settle. The house was mine. The keys were mine. And for the first time since Walter's funeral, I felt the sharp line of a boundary hold. That evening, I sat in my pretty dining room with half a sandwich and a glass of water, and the picture in my head wouldn't stop shifting. I had imagined the four of us crowded around this very table, plates passing and glasses clinking, while we toasted the next chapter. Instead, it was just me and the soft whir of the fridge, watching little clips on my phone of the porch lights snapping on and off, and hearing my son's voice in my ear trying to sand the edges off a lie. Oddly, the emptiness made everything sharp. When you hit bottom, you can feel the floor under your feet. Standing back up has a kind of clean burn that's hard to describe. I could see the line between generosity and being handled, like a stripe of light across the wood. I ran my hand along the new chair backs and thought about what they were built for. Steady and safe enough for an older guest, solid enough to last. I'd asked the carpenter to round the corners and leave a smooth finish that wipes clean. The irony made me smile without warmth. Chloe had inched her way toward my house through people I'd hired. She'd made friends with the property manager's assistant, a young man who loved being useful, and then turned that friendliness into access. Coffee here, a chat there, a quick, "How was your weekend?" That turned into 15 minutes behind the desk. Little favors grow teeth when no one says no. Within a few weeks, he was texting her updates he should have sent to me, and she was acting like it was normal. Piece by piece, the shape of her plan came into focus. She'd listened in when I took a call from the bank about the life insurance and the trust, hovering in the kitchen while I was on speakerphone, pretending to wipe the counter while she memorized details. She'd posed as if she had authority over my accounts and asked questions the representative answered without asking for proof. I never signed a power of attorney in her favor. She knows that. But a stranger on the phone didn't bother to check. Weeks ago, I'd felt something was off and couldn't name it. Now I could. When Daniel came by that night, the relief of telling the truth pulled my shoulders down. I told him plainly, "You didn't talk to me. You tried to steer me. You wanted it to sound like helping was my own idea so I'd feel good about it." He didn't deny it. He stared at the table and rubbed his thumbnail along the edge of a placemat like he could erase the grain. He said Chloe got swept up. She'd fallen for the house, started making lists, couldn't stop picturing where everything would go. If she could just get me to see what she saw, the rest would be easy. "What rest?" I asked. He met my eyes then. He said they figured if I wrote the check, they'd put the title in their names, and later, after a year or two when prices rose, they could sell at market, return my principal, and tell me I came out ahead because I'd get the appreciation too. Win-win, he said, as if the phrase could bleach the stain out of it. They'd tell me the numbers worked out, that I'd get my money back, plus the extra that came from the neighborhood climbing. Everyone would be taken care of. "Everyone except me," I said. He opened his hands like he could remake the argument if I gave him a better angle. He told me again that he didn't realize how far she'd taken things. He said she'd leaned on the assistant for updates, driven by at odd hours, paced around the house and peered through windows, then called him in frustration when no one answered the door. He looked ashamed, but the shame didn't patch the rip. I told him I had footage. I told him she'd tried her key that morning, and the only thing that stopped her was a new lock she didn't expect. He put his head in his hands and didn't speak for a very long time. The next morning, my phone lit up with Chloe's name. Her voice had that sugar coat to it that people use when they're about to deliver something cutting. "I think we've had a misunderstanding," she began. "No," I said. "I understand perfectly. You've been setting me up," she tutted. Harsh words. I was twisting motives. She'd never hurt me on purpose. I was making a drama out of logistics. She said they were only trying to secure a place that would keep our family together. I let her talk until the rhythm of it turned metallic. "Chloe," I said, "you answered my phone and pretended to be someone who could authorize information. You charmed your way into a set of keys and tried to let yourself into a home that isn't yours. There are security clips with timestamps to prove it. Angles from the porch, the entry, the driveway, all of it saved to my phone. That's not caring for family. That's wrong." The warmth dropped out of her voice like someone had kicked the plug out of the wall. "Fine," she said, suddenly flat. "If you want to play hardball, we can play hardball. You bought that house to spite us." I took a breath and steadied my tone. "I bought that house for your family," I said. "I planned to hand you a deed and a set of keys and tell you I wanted us under the same roof." Silence, and then the smallest snort. "Prove it," she said. "Show me a document that says you intended to give it. Otherwise, it sounds like you're rewriting history." "I don't have to prove my heart to you," I said, my throat dry but steady. "But I will tell you what I can prove. I can prove you pretended to be me, or someone who spoke for me. I can prove you took a key you had no right to, and that you tried to use it. I can prove you pushed me to move money without contracts or safeguards. Those things have names, and none of them are kind." She hung up without another word. For a while, I stood in the quiet and counted my breaths like I used to do after Walter died, slow in and out until the shaky feeling left my hands. 20 minutes later, Daniel called, soft-voiced. "Mom, Chloe's upset. She thinks you're punishing her for caring about our future." I stared out the kitchen window at the porch rail where a finch hopped and bobbed, and thought about the countless times over the years I'd tucked away my own anger to keep the peace, the holidays I'd smoothed, the compromises I'd made until I could barely hear my own wants. "I'm done smoothing things over at my expense," I told him. "I won't carry this for you." He started to say he understood, and for the first time I believed he meant it, but there was a heaviness under his tone I couldn't name yet. The call ended, and I stood in my clean, quiet kitchen, the house humming gently around me, a boundary finally set and holding. It felt new and sturdy, like something I could lean on without fear. The call started before breakfast. First Daniel, sounding tired and careful, then Chloe, bright and brittle like glass. They kept circling the same points, reshaping them, trying to press me into a quick yes. By noon, my voicemail stacked up with their voices in different keys: practical, pleading, aggrieved, reasonable. Each message had a clock inside it ticking. I made tea and let the kettle hiss, the noise swallowing the urge to answer. I'd already learned what happens when I rush. Late afternoon, Daniel tried a new angle. "Mom," he said, breath catching, "there's something we haven't told you yet. Chloe's pregnant." The word landed with heat and cold at the same time. For a second, I saw a tiny hand wrapped around his finger, and my chest ached with the sweetness of it. Then the rest of his sentence slid in. "We need stability now. This house would give our baby a proper start." He wasn't shouting, but every syllable nudged. I congratulated him. I meant it. And then I told him gently that a new life is not a crowbar you use on someone's savings. "I'll love that child with my whole heart," I said, "but I won't make a bad decision because you're in a hurry." After I hung up, my hand still shook. I called a lawyer a neighbor had recommended after Walter died, a woman who sounded like she had seen this exact movie too many times. I told her everything and didn't smooth a single edge. The relisting, the key, the cameras, the phone calls, the money push. She asked smart, plain questions and let silence gather where it needed to. When I finished, she said I had grounds to act now if I wanted. Identity theft for the phone stunt, attempted fraud around the money, unlawful entry for the key at the door. "You also have a clean option," she added. "Document everything. Save the texts and voicemails. Keep the footage. If the pressure keeps up, we'll send a letter and make it formal." She told me to stop discussing finances with them on the phone. If anything had to be said, say it in writing. "And do not wire a cent," she said, dry as a gavel. I promised I wouldn't. When we ended the call, a strange calm set in, like someone had handed me a map and a flashlight. An hour later, Chloe texted that she wanted to come by alone to clear the air. I said she could. She arrived with a gift bag and a soft cardigan and sat at my kitchen table, hands folded over the tissue paper. "I'm sorry," she began, and it landed sideways. "I'm sorry this got messy. We were trying to protect your feelings." I waited. "You've been through so much, Laura. We thought if we handled the unfun parts, you could just enjoy the good news." She glanced toward the hall like the house might back her up. "And this place, it's the right place. We were just trying to keep it from slipping away." "What does handled look like?" I asked. Her face brightened like I'd offered a lifeline. She said we could put the title in their names because it would be cleaner for taxes. She used words like optimize and streamline. She said it would be safer for me too, that if something happened to my health, the asset would be protected and we wouldn't have to worry about paperwork or care costs. "It's smart planning," she said, voice sweetening. "You'd still be with us. Nothing would change day to day." "Except the deed," I said. She blinked and recovered. "It's just a formality," she said, "to make sure the family's covered." I sat with that and thought of the young assistant at the management company, the way kindness can be tugged until it turns into a rope. "Chloe," I said, even and clear, "what you're describing has a name. It's financial abuse of an older person dressed up like help. You pushed for access you weren't owed, you tried to move my money without safeguards, and you attempted to let yourself into a home that isn't yours. That isn't planning, that's taking." Her chin lifted a fraction. "You're being dramatic," she said softly. "You're reading malice into practicality." I shook my head. "I'm reading patterns," I said, "and I'm ending them." She sat back, the apology gone flat. "So what now?" she asked, like there might be a door I'd forgotten to unlock. "Now," I said, "you and Daniel live within your means. You pick a place you can afford without my accounts holding up the walls. I'm not co-signing loans. I'm not wiring down payments. I'm not putting anyone else's name on my deed today or later. You don't get my keys. You don't call my bank. If you bring up my money again, it'll be through my lawyer." She searched my face for a crack and found none. "We only wanted to take care of you," she said finally, voice small and sharp at once. "Then start by respecting my no," I answered. She stood, smoothed the cardigan, and set the untouched gift bag on the table like an offering. At the door, she paused. "Daniel's heart is in this," she said. "He just wants the best." "So do I," said. That's why I'm drawing the line now. After she left, I forwarded my notes to the attorney. A short summary of our talk, the exact phrases she'd used, optimize taxes, protect assets, safer for me, and a copy of the new voicemails that hit my phone while Chloe sat in my kitchen. I saved it all in a folder with a plain title I wouldn't forget. The house creaked softly as it cooled, a sound I'd begun to recognize. I made a sandwich I didn't really want and ate it anyway, each bite steady. Somewhere inside the soft ache of becoming a grandmother and the hard edge of saying no, the boundary held. I washed my plate, set it in the rack, and let the quiet close around me like a well-made door. 6 months later, the house felt lived in. I knew where the floor warmed under the morning sun and which step on the porch creaked when you carried groceries. I threw a small get-together for the neighbors who had waved and introduced themselves and brought in packages when I wasn't home. They came with bowls and folding chairs and stories about the block, who planted what, which roofers to avoid, when the garbage truck really showed up. We strung easy conversation across the living room and the porch, and for the first time the rooms held the sound I'd imagined, laughter catching on the trim, voices bouncing off the tall ceilings. People asked about Walter, and I answered without bracing. I could say his name and not crack. When the last glass was rinsed and the front light clicked off, the quiet felt soft instead of hollow. Daniel and I started seeing a counselor who specialized in family boundaries. He showed up every week, on time, and did the work. He said hard things out loud and didn't run from them. He didn't try to defend the indefensible anymore. He sat with it. We learned how to talk without sliding into the grooves we'd worn over years, the ones where I pleaded and he smoothed, or I smoothed and he took. It wasn't magic, but it was movement. We didn't talk about the house much. We talked about trust and how it's built the way a porch is, board by board, not with a single grand gesture. He held his daughter in his arms and cried once, and I held his shoulder and cried too. I visited that baby girl every month, and each time I left a small gift behind, a pack of diapers, a stack of board books, a casserole for the freezer. Love in practical pieces. Meanwhile, my attorney kept a tidy file. She walked me through what she could find without flashing lights and sirens. She said patterns rarely live alone. They travel in families. A few calls and public records later, she slid a summary across her desk. Years ago, Chloe's relatives had arranged for her great-grandmother to sign over a house for convenience. It transferred quietly, then sold days after the funeral. Proceeds split with a story about expenses. No one had gone to prison. The papers were laminated with niceness. The attorney looked at me and said something simple. "You stopped it here." I carried that sentence home like a small stone in my pocket and turned it over whenever doubt tried to rewrite the past. In the middle of all this, Daniel texted one night asking if he could call. When he did, his voice had that careful weight again. He said he and Chloe were updating paperwork and had to name a guardian for their daughter, just in case. "I want it to be you," he said. The sentence hit deep. I knew what it meant to be entrusted with a life. I also knew what happens when you accept responsibility without boundaries. I told him I would consider it on a condition that protected the little one and all of us. Chloe would need to complete a year of basic financial education, real classes, real tests, and we would all attend family therapy for that same year, consistently with attendance documented. Not to punish, to change the pattern. "I can't step into that role otherwise," I said. "I won't be the person who looks the other way." He went quiet. "I'll talk to her," he said finally. The next day, Chloe called. Her voice was smooth and cool, the way a lake looks from far away. She thanked me for loving their daughter and said my condition wasn't necessary. "We're fine," she said. "We don't need outside people telling us how to run our family." I listened. I didn't argue. "Then my answer is no," I said. "If you change your mind, I'm here. But I won't take that on without the safeguards." She sighed, said she was disappointed and disconnected. I set the phone down and watched the light move slowly across the floor, the way it does every afternoon just before it warms the far wall. Life settled. I learned the names of the dogs on the block and the best time to buy bread at the little shop 3 streets over. I kept the porch swept and the mailbox tidy. On Sundays, I baked something simple and wrapped part of it for the older couple next door. Sometimes I sat on the steps and let the evening gather around me, a bowl of cherries in my lap and a book face down at my side, listening to the hum of the street. Daniel stopped by with the baby and a tired smile, and we took slow walks under the trees. We didn't discuss money. We discussed naps and colic and whether she'd get his eyes. I still kept the folder current. Screen grabs, transcripts, dates lined up like fence posts, because the attorney had told me to. But I didn't live inside it. I lived inside my house on Elm Street, the one I chose and paid for and protected. The rooms no longer felt like a test. They felt like a promise I kept to myself, that I could grieve and hold a boundary at the same time, that I could love my family without handing them the steering wheel. Some nights, when the baby had just learned to laugh and the sound echoed in my mind long after I'd driven home, I would stand in the kitchen and run a dish towel along the counter and feel the quiet settle like a hand on my shoulder. I'd think of Walter and say goodnight out loud, not because I needed to, but because it felt kind. And then I'd lock the doors I'd paid to change, set my phone on the charger that pinged with motion clips I rarely had to watch anymore, and go to bed in a home that was finally mine in every way that matters.